Welcome into this week's edition of The Locker Room with Gerhard Mathangani. I'm Chase Robinson. Great show once again. And let's start off with the Jacksonville State Gamecocks. Won their quarterfinal round game last week against Charleston Southern in a big way.
Made a huge statement on national television, game televised by ESPN2. Charleston Southern came into this game with one of the most potent offenses in the entire country, averaging about 350 yards per game, 212 on the ground. JSU basically shut down their running game. They ended up having a lot of yards, or a decent amount of yards in the passing game. But what JSU was able to do is they were able to counter what Charleston Southern did with great offense down the stretch. Now, the Buccaneers stayed in the game, especially late and deep into the game. But with Jacksonville State, what impresses me more and more each week is just how they're able to focus week to week. And they talked about how last year, you know, they were thinking about national championship, and now they weren't thinking national championship. They're just thinking week to week, and it's really showing, and they have another test this week.
Let's talk about some players. Of course, Eli Jenkins. Tremaine Pope had an outstanding game last Friday night. Yeah,
he did, and he became the single-season all-time rushing leader, beating DeMarcus James, which is pretty fitting because for most of his career, he had to sit behind DeMarcus James, and James had a great sophomore year, a good junior year, and a solid senior year, and it only just makes you think what could Pope have done if he didn't have to share the load and carry the load. But I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that he has so much energy now going into this part of the season that he was able to do that over the last 2 or 3 years. But what I really get impressed with by Tremaine Pope, by Buster as everybody calls him, is the fact that even when they know that he's running, he's still able to fall forward, get a lot of yards, and he is so deserving of all the success he's getting. Eli Jenkins is another fantastic player. Both those guys are named All-Americans. And what Eli brings to this team, which I think that nobody really thought going into it, is that he brings a legitimate passing and a legitimate running. Most guys are kind of run heavy or pass heavy. We can look at all kinds of dual threat quarterbacks going back through history, but he really does give you 100% legitimate things that you need to work on defensively on both sides.
The Gamecocks meet up with a familiar foe in Sam Houston State this Saturday.
It's a rematch of last year's second-round playoff game in which Sam Houston State won, and they propelled themselves from that win into the semifinals. It's now kind of fitting that these two teams are meeting in the semifinals. Jacksonville State, I like the fact that they're meeting this team for a multitude of reasons. Number one is going to really test their mental capacities once again. And they've answered every challenge. I'm talking about, you go all the way back to the beginning of the season when they played Chattanooga, to when they played Auburn, to when they played some of the teams that are lesser in the OVC schedule. Would they look ahead? They didn't look ahead. Now in the playoffs, they're not looking ahead. Here's another challenge against the team that beat you in a rematch game from last year. It's just another challenge and another way for Jacksonville State to answer the call once again.
And rematch is on their mind, and here's what Coach John Gross had to say about that this week.
That only goes so far, you know. I mean, it's going to come down to execution and who plays the best and who prepared the best. So our guys have bought into that. We'll have a great week. We'll be ready to play, and really we'll go back to playing that faceless opponent. You can't let those emotions get into it, you know. So I think that you just got to play the game the way we have every week, and, you know, just I think we'll be okay.
The Gamecocks and Sam Houston State, that's this Saturday, 3 p.m. on ESPNU, so you can check that out on there. Let's switch gears to some high school football. You were able to go out Tuesday as the Piedmont Bulldogs accepted their trophy and all that presentation. What a great day for them, Gerhard.
It's always really fun to go to these things, and each time a team wins a state championship, members of the Alabama High School Athletic Association, also some political members are always able to come. Yesterday or Tuesday was such a good event because you were able to see Steve Savarese and Alvin Briggs and Mike Welch and Congressman Mike Rogers that you see there, and lots of people from the city council and the county, and they've done a good job. Piedmont did is instead of just separating everybody, they put them all together into one building. But this really exemplifies the kind of season that they had, and they had such an incredible year together as a team, then as a community, and now to bring it all together for that trophy presentation on Tuesday was just an incredible thing to watch.
You know, Piedmont, I love the community aspect of Piedmont football, and that means so much to them. It's their second state championship, like you said, and means a lot to them. So let's hear what not only what the players, coaches, but what what Executive Director Steve Savarese had to say at the trophy presentation.
It's a fun day. We get recognized by a lot of the state high school athletic association officials and our coaches and our town and our students. So, I mean, I guess just the hard work paid off, and today just shows that.
we just felt like it would be pretty cool if we could have a ceremony and have all those people here at one time with our entire student body, as well as our fans and parents, because in a place like Piedmont, something like this is a community accomplishment. I mean, it's, a group of kids and coaches that maybe went on the field and played the game, but, when you throw the band, the cheerleaders, the student section, the administration, the local governments, all the fans, the booster club, it means something in Piedmont, Alabama for our team to be able to have a successful year like this. And really, when I say that we all share in it, we really do.
Well, they exemplify excellence. This is a community that takes a lot of pride in all their athletic programs, and it's exemplified by all of their sports. They do an outstanding job, and winning their second state football championship is just a tremendous accomplishment.
And again, congratulations to the Piedmont Bulldogs, your 3A state champions. We're going to grab a timeout. When we come back, we'll talk some high school basketball, so stay with us in the locker room. And back here in the locker room, and Gerhard, this past Saturday was the TV24 Holiday Showcase. We saw a lot of basketball and a lot of good basketball.
Started at 10 o'clock in the morning, didn't go home until about 10:30 at night. It was all-day basketball. Kind of reminded me of the regionals that come up in February. We're able to see a lot of local teams matched up against teams that we might not see. A lot of the DeKalb County teams ended up coming down. We saw Spain Park out of Birmingham, who was a top 5 team.
Right.
They've already played Sacred Heart. They did play Gadsden City that night. We were able to get a good feel of where some of our local teams stand on a neutral court.
Right.
And where they stand now that we're full-fledged in the basketball season. We're no longer in football, and now we're into the winter sports, and so teams are now getting a footing about where they are, where they want to be, and the kind of identity these teams have. So it's really interesting to see on Saturday.
Talk about some teams you saw that you were impressed with, some players, some games. Just some things you saw from Saturday.
Yeah, one of the teams I was most impressed with was Cherokee County. I mean, that team going into their big game on Saturday, they were just, to me, very, very sound. And they seemed like a hungry team. They were led by a kid named Joel Wester, who is just one of the best, one of the most phenomenal shooters I've seen in quite some time here in East Alabama. Coached by his dad, and we'll see how far they go. Sacred Heart, you can't really say enough about the defending 1A state champions. They played Carrollton, who was a runner-up in Class 4A out of the state of Georgia. Carrollton was athletic. Carrollton was big, but Sacred Heart was just a lot better. They were more talented. They really wore them down the stretch, and you got to see the way they play basketball. The way they like to play is to hold teams to single-digit quarters. And what separated the game was the second quarter. They outscored them 20-9.
Right.
And that's when they really make their mark on teams, is where their defense and really using it to their offense. Another team that does that historically is Talladega. And I was impressed by them as well. And I was also impressed with Jacksonville. Jacksonville lost Cam Horton, their leading scorer, already dropped 30-something points 2 nights before. And he goes out with concussion protocol. I don't want to call it a concussion. He has been diagnosed with that. But he hit his head really hard. But his team really came back up, and they kind of galvanized without him. And so you got to see what Jacksonville was without their best player. Pretty impressive.
And let's take a look now at our power poll, our East Alabama power poll for the boys. First up, we've been talking about some of these teams so far, but there you see Sacred Heart at number 1. Again, they had the big win over Carrollton. Gadsden City at number 2. They lost in overtime to Spain Park on Saturday. What a great game that was. That was our 9th cap of the Holiday Showcase. And there you see number 3, Cherokee County moved into that number 3 spot. We had them at number 4 the past couple weeks. We moved them up to number 3 after watching them Saturday, because what a great performance they had. And their leading shooter there, Joel Wester. Anniston at number 4. Talladega at number 5. We watched them defeat White Plains on Saturday. And then Westbrook Christian there at number 6. White Plains at 7. The Oxford Yellow Jackets at 8. Jacksonville at 9. And the Alexandria Valley Cubs at 10.
It's a very interesting list. We look at those top 2 teams, and people who might have issue with it say, hey, Gadsden City beat Sacred Heart head-to-head, and you can make an argument about that.
Right.
But the thing is, that was the first game of the season, and really since then, I think Sacred Heart's really improved a lot more than Gadsden City's improved. And then you look at Saturday, a team that Gadsden City took to overtime and lost by a very slim margin. That's the same team that Sacred Heart beat by 25, shooting 71%. So there's going to be some disparity there at the very top, but I just don't think you can get away from the Cardinals right now.
Well, let's take a look now at the girls' power poll here on the locker room. There you see Anniston at number 1, Spring Garden at number 2. They always have a good girls program over at Spring Garden. Gadsden City number 3, Jacksonville 4, Pleasant Valley 5. They've been hot lately. Sachs at 6, Southside 7. White Plains, they've been hot as well. So has Weaver coming in at number 9, and then Piedmont in there at number 10. So that is your girls power poll for East Alabama. Let's shift gears now and talk a little college basketball. It's getting underway, not quite into conference play yet, but still a lot of great basketball going on.
Yeah, there is, and there's a lot of great, as far as I would say, building blocks towards what teams are looking for when you move into conference play, and you bring it here locally to the teams in this area, whether it's Alabama or whether it's Auburn, and we're seeing that both these teams seemingly look improved, and both will have a pretty daunting task in their SEC schedules. Now, they also both have a chance, especially with Alabama, to get themselves into an at-large bid. I don't think anybody expects them to win the championship, SEC championship. I think that is hands down Kentucky being the favorite. But we're seeing what Avery Johnson and Bruce Pearl are doing with these teams. They can get themselves, if they can get north of 20 wins, they can get themselves into an at-large bid coming out of the SEC, and which would be great for the SEC. You look around the country and some of the interesting storylines, obviously Wisconsin, who was a Final Four team over the last couple of years, their coach just abruptly resigned on late Tuesday night, early Wednesday morning, and they now have a new head coach. And so we'll see where the Wisconsin Badgers go. We'll also see where Ohio State is. Then you have a lot of the powers, the Dukes, the Kentuckys, the Kansas. We'll see how they all shake out here over the next few weeks. But college basketball is one of those sports that gets really interesting as the calendar turns to the next year, and then after the football season, because that's when you're in the meat of a conference play, and you start to find out who teams really are.
For Alabama, we watched them get beat by a team by 40, Dayton.
Yeah.
They lost to Dayton by 40 and then came out and beat Wichita State, Notre Dame, and Clemson. What's Avery Johnson got going down there?
I think he's getting a team that's starting to buy into what he wants and what he's looking for. And, if those two teams played right now, being Alabama and Dayton, completely different ball game. And I think these are just some of the growing pains that come with not just a first-year coach with a new school, but a first-year coach in college basketball in general. Now, he has a son that went to Texas A&M. He's transferring to Alabama. So he sees it from a father perspective, but he didn't see it from a coaching perspective. The in-game adjustments, the timeouts, the scouting, how to deal with, the restricted hours that you can work with players. In the NBA, you call them in on a Tuesday morning, they'll all be there because they're getting paid for it. And now they're student athletes here at Alabama. I think that he's adjusting, and their schedule and their wins and losses are showing that.
Well, when we come back from this break, it's the Locker Room Roundtable. We'll talk about the bowl games and our Pick 6. So stay with us right here in the Locker Room. Back here on the Locker Room, and it's time for the Locker Room Roundtable. Let's start off with Tennessee. Butch Jones giving him a $500,000 raise this week. They didn't have the season they wanted the last several seasons with Butch Jones. Is Tennessee happy with him?
I think they're happy-ish. And I think what this $500,000 raise does is it keeps him happy, and that way it keeps him from looking for other jobs. But it does it without extending his contract.
Right.
He's on contract through 2020. But what this does is this says, we like you and we're investing in you, but we don't want to invest long term because just in case we don't like you in 2 years, we don't want to have a massive buyout on the back end of that. So I think it's a smart move for Tennessee. They're 8-4, going to Outback Bowl, going to New Year's Day Bowl. It's about where they want as far as climbing the ladder. They probably wanted this 2 years ago, knowing Tennessee's expectations, but he's building towards what they want. And so they're going to give him some recruiting classes. They'll give him a couple more years, but they're giving him, I think the biggest thing is they're giving him the money up front instead of saying, we're committing to you long term.
Now, like we knew, Kirby Smart hired at Georgia just a couple of weeks ago, but he's going to stay with Bama until the end. Where's his focus at right now?
At the beginning, I really didn't like the move for him staying at Alabama, but then you start to break it down, and it actually makes a lot of sense because the recruiting dead period really started earlier this week on Monday, the 14th. And so really nobody could talk to anybody else. So he was able to go and set his roots down in Athens. And what he did out there was pretty impressive. He went and hired Jim Chaney as the offensive coordinator, coached at Pitt. He's a low-profile guy. A lot of people haven't heard of him. But one of the biggest things he did was he kept that five-star quarterback from going anywhere else, Jacob Easton out of Washington. And it was between Georgia and Florida. And could you imagine a firestorm had Georgia lost him? Kirby Smart's now in Tuscaloosa, and then he goes to Florida, the SEC champions. I just think there would have been a firestorm, but he was able to get his offensive coordinator in, he's in control of the defense, a lot like Nick Saban.
Right.
But he was able to get his offensive coordinator in. He was able to get the biggest prospect in the country in that 5-star quarterback, one of the biggest prospects really out of any class or out of any player in 2016. So he's able to solidify his offense, and then now he can now focus on Alabama. Now, if they're able to win a national championship, he now comes to Tuscaloosa or comes to Athens and says, look what I did once again. And then that now recruits itself. So I think that at the beginning, I didn't think it was a great move, but I like it on the back end.
Scott Cochran, the strength and conditioning coach at Alabama.
Yeah.
There was rumors he was going to go to Georgia with Kirby, but there was an announcement made this week he's staying in Alabama. How big is that for Alabama?
It's big, but I really more think it's like a mental ploy because, and not to say strength and conditioning coaches are a dime a dozen because they're not, but they are semi-replaceable because the science of what you want to do with these athletes is about the same. There's a lot of it's out there. But what he brings to this program is he brings a focus and he brings an energy that Nick Saban doesn't have to bring in the summertime.
Right.
He creates that fourth quarter program, which is big. But Kirby Smart's been around this fourth quarter program for a while too. So he will hire a guy that he knows and trusts, and he could teach them what Scott Cochran does as far as putting a program together to get the athletes' bodies where they need to be. So I think more so than anything else is this is just a Nick Saban extra recruiting edge to show you might have left, but I'm still the king. I'm still the boss. I'm still the man around here. I just think that it does a lot more intangibly than it does tangibly, and it really him taking Jeremy Pruitt away from Athens into Tuscaloosa, I think is another, another kind of jab. And here's the thing: I think Nick Saban loves Kirby Smart. I don't use that word lightly. I think he really does think he loves Kirby Smart. Really thinks of him like a son or like a brother. But I think that he's now an enemy, and and anybody's an enemy with Nick Saban as far as recruiting goes. They get the full gauntlet of Nick Saban enemy recruiting, and I think Scott Cochran announcing that he's staying was another part of that.
Auburn named their defensive coordinator just for the bowl game. Lance Thompson, he'll be taking the defense. Talk about that and how that'll flow for Auburn.
It's a weird and interesting situation going on over there because by all reports, they went after Chad Kelly, a former Auburn player, played for Pat Dye, one of the best defensive coordinators in the country, now at Florida State with Jimbo Fisher. Not able to get him. Tavares Robinson, the guy we talked about last week here with Mickey Shadricks, he's now at South Carolina with Will Muschamp. They lost Muschamp to a job that people think is subpar. I think your good defensive coaches are looking away from Auburn. And so they hired Lance Thompson to coach and to call the plays in the bowl game. But I'm really excited and anticipating the ripple effect of these coaches, quote unquote, turning Auburn away, because none of this stuff is official because we don't know the talk behind the veil, so to speak. But what this really does is that this shows to me that Auburn is not getting the best coaches, and they're not getting that slam dunk guy. They just need to find a guy that will implement what Gus Malzahn wants. But right now, they're swinging and they're striking out.
Well, it'll be interesting to see there, and of course, Auburn and Memphis play in the Birmingham Bowl. And let's start our pick six right now. It's our bowl special pick six here. So let's start. The first game up is that one right there, Auburn and Memphis and Gerhard. I'm going to go in this Birmingham Bowl. I'm going with the Memphis Tigers over the Auburn Tigers.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Memphis has a better quarterback, and Auburn lost their defensive coordinator. They're having Lance Thompson call the plays. I just don't think it's going to be enough to beat Memphis. I just think Memphis, they did lose their head coach, Justin Fuente, to Virginia Tech, but I think that Memphis right now, they're leaning on a quarterback that I think, in my opinion, is a lot better than Auburn's defense. And Memphis is more fired up to be a part of this game than Auburn is. So it's a little bit embarrassing for the Auburn Tigers. I just think that Memphis will use this as a springboard more. And Auburn will use this game, in my opinion, Auburn will use this game to get a lot of young guys in, a lot of young guys some reps. And, of course, you'll get the mistakes that come with that.
Well, Mickey Shadrick's not able to join us here, but we have his picks anyway. There you see Mickey going with the Memphis Tigers as well. Next game up, it's Penn State and Georgia. Let's see which one I go with. Georgia. I'm going the Georgia Bulldogs over the Penn State Nittany Lions in the Tax Slayer Bowl.
Number one, it's the most hilarious name for a bowl game ever. But the Georgia Bulldogs, to me, is because of all the things we just talked about. They don't have a head coach going into this game. I just think that Penn State is using this more as a springboard for next year, and I think next year is really promising for Penn State. If there's one team to watch out of the Big Ten, I say it's Penn State. This will be the first game that Penn State uses to get into that 2016 mode. I think they're more amped up, they're more fired up. Penn State wins this game.
And let's see which one Mickey goes with. And there you see he's with me. Georgia Bulldogs, Mickey's pick in this one. Next up, it's Ole Miss, or let's see, it's Florida and Michigan in the Buffalo Wild Wings Citrus Bowl. And I'm going with the Florida Gators, the SEC streak there. We saw them in the SEC championship against Alabama. They struggled, but I think they're going to come out here and make a statement for the SEC and for Jim McElwain and the incredible job he's done so far this season.
Another Big Ten SEC matchup. It's really, really interesting on paper, but once again, I'm going with the Big Ten. I think what this game will show is just a microcosm where the SEC is. SEC is down this year. SEC is really, really down this year, and the Big Ten is up, and I think it'll show in these bowl games. And for me, this Michigan pick in this game, even though it's in Florida's backyard, I think that the Wolverines right now are trending in the direction that they want to. They're trending up, and Florida, disappointed after the SEC championship game. Who knows where their heart and their mind and all that are going to be going into this. I like the Wolverines.
And Mickey's pick in this one, he is with you, Gerhard, in the Michigan Wolverines in the Citrus Bowl. Next bowl up, it's the Ole Miss Rebels and the Oklahoma State Cowboys in the All-State Sugar Bowl. And once again, I'm going with the SEC team in this one, the Ole Miss Rebels.
I can't figure Ole Miss out this year. They had Robert Kendichi, who a story came out yesterday that he fell from a 4th-story window in Atlanta. And kids make mistakes, and I'm not blaming the kid for anything, but I just think that Ole Miss, really ever since that loss to Memphis, they just have not been on track, really ever since then. I think Oklahoma State is a little bit fired up to be in this game because, they kind of back-ended their season. They really had a great end to their year and not really capitalizing where they want to capitalize, and I think that they want to get to where Oklahoma is. In order to do that, you got to do what Oklahoma's done. That's beat an SEC team. So they'll be fired up to play in the Sugar Bowl.
And let's see which one Mickey goes with here. He's with me over on the Ole Miss side. He has Ole Miss defeating Oklahoma State. Next game up, it is the Orange Bowl in the playoffs as Clemson and Oklahoma go at it. I am going with the Clemson Tigers to defeat Oklahoma here in this playoff game.
This is a 1 seed versus a 4 seed. Clemson's a 1 seed. Oklahoma's 4 seed. Oklahoma's favored. Whenever games like that happen, I go with the favorite because I think Vegas knows what they're talking about. I like Oklahoma in this game over the Tigers.
And let's see which one Mickey goes with. He is going with the Oklahoma Sooners. You've been hearing him the past few weeks plead his case for Oklahoma. And when we've talked playoffs, so Mickey going with Oklahoma. And the next playoff game is the Goodyear Cotton Bowl, Alabama, Michigan State. I'm going with a Tide in this one.
Yeah, I said the SEC is down, and they are down, but there's one team that's elite. And that's the Alabama Crimson Tide, and I really like them not only in this game, but like them to go on and win the national championship.
And let's see which one Mickey's going with, and he's right there with us with the Alabama Crimson Tide. That was our bowl edition there of the Pick Six, and thank you all for joining us here on The Locker Room. We're going to take the next couple of weeks off, but we'll be back after Christmas and after New Year's, back and ready as ever in 2016. Hope every one of you has a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and we'll see you next year.